Did they bring him back because they want to go more core Warcraft back in the day? Do they want to bring a little bit of that back? Not in World of Warcraft. Let the team run away with whatever vibe and theme they have for that. But if you want Warcraft back, in the way that you keep talking about, in the way that Blizzard need to bring back Warcraft as a, hey, this is World of Warcraft, this is orcs and beer. This is orcs, axes, humans fighting orcs, armor been ripped off, demons are coming in to tear people apart, that kind of stuff. If you want that back and you bring Metzen on board and you go, right, we've got effectively carte blanche, because you'll notice with Dragonflight they seem to have had that. Where it's like, how many devs you need in? He just goes, yes. They're like, work away, big man. You can have a PvP team after this game has been run for nearly 20 years. At long last. Great, fantastic. Smart.
They'll have PvP balance within the decade, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like, yeah, there's the possibility to try to bring Warcraft back into the cultural consciousness in the different route of going, okay, World of Warcraft's going to take this, I don't want to say it's like a more cuddly route, but you know, it's a little bit less sweaty, a little bit more sweetie, and then you could do the opposite with what Metzen's on. I'm just like, I don't know if people are going to really particularly think about it for too long until it's announced, but I imagine like if you're going to bring back BlizzCon and you've got an expansion announcement and it's very hype, but also you're probably going to the void, so people are like, we're back in space, yay, I guess. Maybe, but...
I think, right, they know how to position that in a way that won't make people furious.
That's true, yeah.
It can happen, like, Warcraft 2, Beyond the Dark Portal. They can make other worlds not feel like space, right?
Slow Argus. Well, they need to feel like space, but just not like too far away. Or we're only visiting.
FF14 has a fucking spaceship in it.
Yeah.
Like, they can get away with stuff. They just need to do it well. Like, I didn't mind I thought the Legion spaceships were kind of cool.
I mean, that's the thing. I always go back to everyone loved Argus.
The Legion spaceships looked pretty 40. Okay, they literally didn't look 40K, but they were more 40K than Mass Effect. Let's put it that way, right? Like 40K, where like a spaceship will also sort of look like a cathedral for some reason.
Cool.
Because it's
that's
40K,
the answer. It's cool.
and it's insane. They can do that. And there's a lot of ways where they could just do it quite fantastically that would work well too, especially if it is Void. Actually, both Void and Light. Like, you've got so many strong visual things you can play with, especially now. Void is hyper obvious, but with Light, I'd point people to how they animated Inarius in the Diablo 4 cinematic that they showed, because like I think whenever we do see more Light coming, when we get to see like angry, pissed off Light, it'll be more like angry Inarius with his big fucking Bluefin's the tuna. Oh, it's called a blue something. It's like a type of squid, right? But it's this squid that actually just looks like an alien tentacle monster. The way that like, it was like a really rare video, but the way that the squid moved totally looks like it was like some of the motion they referenced for how Inarius moved in that Diablo cinematic. So they can make Light look really cool. That like, this is bright, but it's like fucking crackling and burning. So that cosmic stuff can feel cool.
The crackling and burning is a good point, because they actually very
Big
much...
Fin Squid, that was it. Cheers, donuts.
Yeah. They very much went into that for how the like Ember Ward in Revendreth was.
Yeah, it's just a pity that they made it.
Like,
they just happened to make it weird Disney. Like, I think the thing that fucked up so much of that with Shadowlands was, in my opinion, what I would call the slight creative bankruptcy of just grabbing shit wholesale and doing like, oh yeah, we've just Disney-ified fucking vampires done. You know? It's like Revendreth felt like it had no fucking creativity. It felt like it was just a hyper Americanized, we have just grabbed some European shit we've heard about at some point and fucking thrown it together with no fucking deep cultural understanding, right? Because when you do that well, it feels really good. And there's plenty of times where Blizzard have done that, I don't know, maybe with like regions of the world and cultures that are closer to home for the creatives involved, where like it just feels way better. Whereas Revendreth, especially like how they handle all those fucking shitty British, cheesy British accents, and nothing seemed fucking serious. It was a total mess. That was like the way that Revendreth had a lot of things that could have been cool. And I feel like the domestic audience would probably be totally happy with that. But maybe the international audience is going to see the likes of Revendreth and just be like, oh, geez, guys, really? I can't wait until you give us literal leprechauns next.
I think...
And that basically kind of fucked up a lot of the potentially cool things for how the light could feel.
Yeah, I think another way to kind of talk about how they're doing this, I guess, recently is actually, and we're going to talk about this a little bit further on in the show, but how they're separating Void now. Because Void has always, you think Void, you think Cthulhu, right? You think N'Zoth, you think Yogg-Saron. You think of purple, you think of tentacles, you think of Shadow Priest stuff, right?
Tentacle?
Yeah, of course. But in 10.1, as I'm sure a lot of you have seen, like, spoiler-wise and checking data mining and things, and we'll talk about this a little bit later with some druid spell we found in the data mining. Well, we didn't find it, someone found it. Portergage, of course, but as always, because that's always
the prolific Portergage.
It's either Portergage or Samaya. It's one of those two finds everything. God bless them. But Cosmic Void being a lot more bluey, being a lot kind of more, you've seen the Sarkareth model. It's a little bit more of that. Yeah, okay. There's Void, open bracket, old god, and then there's Void, Forma del Cosmos, or whatever Cosmos is in Spanish. But you get the idea of they're two very distinct things. So they're going for, yeah, there you go. We can separate these things out and go, this is the same concept, but we can evolve it. And they've made that whole design language, they've evolved on it, they've made things look very distinct. So you know what's, I mean, think of it from a pretty pragmatic perspective. Why would you need different design language for old gaudy stuff and spacey stuff? What if the two are against each other in some capacity, and you need to see the clarity, that kind of thing?
A further factionization.
Yes,
I think it's in a way, right? It felt like fucking Duplo blocks back when we were like, okay, so Blizzard have scraped together enough money to license 6 Pantone colors. And these colors will represent the entire plot of World of Warcraft.
Sick.
Right, I mean, I'm exaggerating that on purpose,
Just
don't worry. But just the way it was like, oh no, the color bright yellow is going to fight the color deep purple. And that can just feel a bit like, all right, we're going to smash our action men together and see what happens. Whereas the more the things are like broken up and factionalized, I think that is where you get actually to plenty of the strengths of the Warcraft universe, whenever that comes in. You think about some of the original stuff where, you have all the different orc clans who all just like act very differently. And, the people felt like a cool, like, I guess, cultural diversity between all the different orcs. People who were like, oh, that clan, I really like that clan. And then you look at the Horde, that's the big strength of the Horde. And actually, funny enough, when you look at the humans, that was the strength of the humans until
the Alliance.
A character that actually, it's weird. I think Anduin's a good character, but I think he's damaged the IP.
Oh, definitely.
I think Anduin has humongously damaged the IP because he has represented the Anduinification of good. Right? Where they've turned like all good into cuddly, fuzzy Anduin, soft boy, cinnamon, fucking squeegee. If you're stressed, squeeze this toy. Fucking sweet, good boy, spelled Boye. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of sad because like a lot of what makes Anduin work as a character is like good, it's his fucking inner, his inner experience, right? Is I think something that's strong and throughout, it was particularly strong throughout Mists of Pandaria, but I think they've just kind of like laid it on a bit thick, and it's less like the fault is on Anduin. It's just they kind of forgot for a while that the Alliance needs to be more than Anduin. In a way, because when it was just like, but Tyronda's now just turned into a night warrior.
Yeah, there's a little bit,
and the Alliance got boring. But then when you actually look at the Alliance, or in the older days, right? You know, you've got fucking big racist Carathos.
Somebody.
You know, you've got like a bunch of rumbly friggin' characters. They're, you know, I think you have better, not better villains, but you know, the Garthos, you want to slap them about. But anyway, you've got like the different human kingdoms who are all a little bit different, right? But then it just kind of turned into like Stormwind, Anduin time, which I guess is the thing that actually people, when there was a little bit of pushback against the Heritage armor, a lot of people like wanted more of Warcraft's humans to be represented. Because one of the things about Warcraft's humans is they actually have, compared to most fantasy humans, pretty cool backstory. Pretty cool different mix of like little cultures and things that have happened. It's just that it's not really represented that well in the game.
Yeah,
right?
So many humans and so much of that story got destroyed by the time of like World of Warcraft.
Mm-hmm.
It never bothered to rebuild humans because it didn't have the ability to focus on that, because it's like, even if you think of who the humans are also the Forsaken. Like they are, they're all dead humans.
Yeah.
That's the one thing people don't really focus on a lot of the time, except for people who love Forsaken and think about that and talk about that all the time. And they're like, that stuff isn't really actually focused on some capacity, because even like the Forsaken and different, I guess, issues that crop up within the Alliance on how to treat the Forsaken, because say one clan or culture of humans are like, no, they're still us, they're just dead. And others are like, no, they're on the Horde, kill the shit out of them. They're like, well, there's an interesting conflict, but they never bothered to do any of that. And I think they've never been interested in the humans beyond Stormwind, because so much that is profoundly legacy lore, where you ask the average World of Warcraft player about, maybe not Arathi anymore, but you try to ask them about any other kingdom, they're like, what? Lordaeron? What's that? I don't know what Lordaeron is. Is that the place where all the dead are? Like, yes, but there's more to it than that, please.
Yeah.
It's like even the Gul'nans and them being like, obviously they're Worgen now, but they're humans. You're like, well, where's the fun stuff there? And it's just, they've never cared. But then I think a lot of people I think For the Horde was a lot more important to most people in how they thought of World of Warcraft than For the Alliance, in terms of how it was marketed, because that was that was the unique stuff that you could tell at a glance.
Yeah.
But for humans, you can't tell they're very unique at a glance, I think.
Well, I think like Warcraft 3 established the IP narratively for so many people, and that's where the Horde was this like big group of people, whereas the Alliance was more focused on, I guess, kind of like one man's fall.
It was, Arthas and Jin are the two.
I guess the reason I bring up the like factionalization is that's like a lot of the stuff that made the original lore feel good and the world feel good. Yeah, and it's actually, whenever WoW just kind of got a little bit too dumbed down, and it was kind of like, the macro narrative was just big Duplo blocks smashing together, and then the micro narrative was basically like, oh yeah, this is fantasy EastEnders, where we're just going to focus on a small bunch of our main characters that we care about a lot, and they weren't like doing the best job of like kind of like storytelling for a world. So I guess like the more factionalization within the Void is like a good example, because it now means that the Void's not just angry purple bad. We gotta know that like all the Black Empire stuff, there's going to be more to that. Void Lords,
Xal'atath
old
was
gods,
seated,
what do they want? Different things. Xal'atath as well. So I think that's it's more interesting when there's like sub factions to all of these groups. And the reason why like the Titans could be the Titans way in the past is because that wasn't the story. That was just like a bit of backdrop lore. Whereas now, if like the story of the kind of overall world is going to be at this larger scale, then you kind of do need to say dive into the Titans, add a little bit more to them. Do they have like different little sub factions?
Yeah, do you go up or do you go down? They went up.
Yeah, and I've seen so many just different theories of people saying, oh yeah, well, why are Titans not in the Plane of Order? How did they escape? Imagine if the Winter Queen was just gallivanting around in a spaceship. So there's even some people being like, oh, what if these Titans aren't, what if there's something else going on? It's like, yeah, I don't know, maybe, that would be cool. But just that, like, I guess subdividing things up a little bit.
Yeah, it
trying to
literally
get
creates
more
drama.
Yeah.
It's literally like it.
Yeah, there are times where no, I shouldn't just immediately turn it into Star Trek.
You should all the time. Every
Okay.
time.
Deep Space Nine allows for more conflict than like a lot of other Trek in its era, and it's absolutely the better for it. In the same way that like a lot of Gene Roddenberry mandates are what helped make. Look, I love TNG. TNG season 1 and most of 2 are kind of shit. That's like a pretty uncontroversial opinion within the Trek fandom, though. Yeah, Warcraft just needs more of that depth, more stuff you can imprint your imagination onto, instead of just Alliance, Horde. I guess that's why the Horde was always way stronger.
Yeah, it was.
And then they added Blood Elves, and all of the Alliance players finally felt like they could play the Horde.
And then, so, yeah, Blood Elves were the downfall of World of Warcraft.
There you go.
I 100% agree. They destroyed the Horde, and by virtue, destroyed the Alliance.
I have a Picard episode to watch tonight, yes.
Very good.
Star Trek Picard Season 3. Actually, the most miraculous turnaround I've ever fucking seen.
I wonder what they did. I wonder how they managed that. Did they replace a writer that's known for being a very bad writer with a good writer who's known for being good?
Incredible turn of events. Less cosmic, more detailed, mortal conflict and texture. Yeah. It's like, I'm fine for more cosmic small c that can even be driven by cosmic big C. It's just that it needs to feel, as you say, it needs to feel more focused on like the grounded experience of like the characters and the peoples that we know.
I think there's like 3 different things that are almost in like a weird confluence here. And I think it is setting, plot, and experience. Where you can have the cosmos as a setting, you can have it as a plot, but you can't have it as the experience, because that doesn't make any sense to anyone. I think
maybe it's not why they're in the door in the first place.
Yeah, because it's like, right, here, let's go to space. What happens in space? Okay, we're in space, fine. What can happen in space? Anything can happen in space. It's like, we could have gone to Pandaria and there'd been no faction conflict whatsoever. That could have happened. But we went to Pandaria because you're like, well, here's an island. What do you do in an island? Fight, I guess.
Fucking kill each other.
Yeah, so you go to space. You're like, what do we do in space? You could easily have the Horde and the Alliance beat the shit out of each other in space. And then you go, oh, it's Warcraft in space. Cool. But the issue is you go to space and then it's not about, like, the plot is not about that kind of thing. And obviously it could be about more things. It could be about, like, you go to space, and I guess this is the point where you go to space and what happens there? You get all the drama with Alleria, Dralian. You get all the drama with Xalatath, with Shara in front of the Void. You get drama with Velen, and like Velen ultimately trying to, him finishing his arc. You've got Anduin coming back and not knowing Shadow and Light. You're like, if that's your plot, then you can do that in space, or you can do that in Azeroth. Either way, it'll be like, cool. The space is just a backdrop.
Yeah, it's just whenever
but you can't have the space be the plot, where it's like, what's the plot? What's the whole point? We're here to do space things and solve space stuff. And everyone goes, but what about the stuff I like? What about the relatable human stuff? I think that's ultimately kind of the problem. Where it's like, I mean, Sad Dingus says last time I gave a crap, but a bad guy was Garrosh. You think about that for 2 seconds, you go, oh, well, yeah, of course, because Garrosh was the last time that a villain was really actually important to the core story, and someone who was, a hero turned villain in a sense, or somebody could have been a hero. Because you saw the fall, so you had context for them as a villain, as opposed to someone kicking the door down going, I'm the villain, fight me. And you're like, do I have to, really? I mean, some plot reason? Sure, whatever.
Sometimes
but you don't feel it. Like, sometimes it works, but...
You need a mix of both. I think it's helped. With World of Warcraft, it's been good whenever they've been able to, use characters they've already established. I suppose having to pull the Incarnates out of their ass and Starkarath out of their ass. I mean, I say pull out of their ass, I just mean they didn't exist before this expansion. That's always hard. I'll definitely give them credit that, like, in a short narrative time, they have done a good job with this expansion. So it's absolutely thumbs up for that. Yeah. But, and it's kind of weird because you could talk about TBC where it's like, so rooted in Warcraft lore, but also TBC's story was hot shit.
Oh,
TBC, like, I mean, there was some like cool bits of lore backdrop that in themselves were a little bit controversial at the time, but TBC was a narrative mess.
there's like as soon as you start to examine TBC from how they got the TBC from Classic, how it felt, how it changed, and obviously like you have to be a very old player now to still be mad at the Broken and Draenei retcon. But that's one of the things that like that was really awful. Like that completely changed something that people loved about the setting. And they also went, obviously it was a little bit cool at the time because, you know, people had less experience with overall media because we weren't in the world where you had media shoved down your throat 24 hours a day. And like, okay, we're going to space, but Warcraft, okay, that's cool. But it didn't feel spacey. It felt space fantasy-ish.
It did.
It didn't feel like sci-fi, even though you went to Netherstorm and you're like, what's this, a biodome? Whatever you call those things? Like, oh, and then a spaceship that made a crystal? Okay, but it was still like, oh, it's Warcraft, is fantasy-ish. So it like felt that way. But I think they haven't made anything quite as stupid since. Except you look at Cataclysm and go, oh yeah, Cataclysm are in the game.
Yeah, it's kind
they
of
ruin the game every 2 expansions, basically.
Wow, it's been a rule for a long time. No, it's a miracle that
basically.
Wrath of the Lich King, even though it had a few missteps, was as narratively successful as it was. Because it like, yeah, it really was. And it is that thing, Blizzard, you know, it was like big picture was always their thing, less so the details. And a lot of that the backdrop that was there, but they didn't really spend too much time on. People would really engage with that and enjoy that, like, and enjoy the big world. But as soon as it all gets sucked into an A plot, that's always when Blizzard have struggled a bit more. So I guess that's the thing about, like, how do we construct villains? You know, because like you had Kale and Vash and all those people in TBC, similar with Wrath of the Lich King, right? I suppose it is just we kind of need more Garrosh-like characters. We need more characters that are our friends and then are our enemies, or characters that are enemies and then are our friends. And I suppose that is where like Yrel could be a good example of, like, oh yeah, you established a character, did things with the character, and now the character is going to come back and play a role in the story. Cool.
Yeah. Well,
instead of all these times where, like, say Telia appears and she may as well not matter to the narrative.
Well, the narrative, yeah. I think that they had ideas for her and Bolvar being a little bit more important in how they spoke to each other. And I think that ultimately worked to, like, tempt to triage, to bandage, to put a big, like, what do you call those things that stem the bleeding when you've lost a limb? One of those over Bolvar's character writing. Where it's like, oh yeah, look, his daughter, they're okay now, it's fine, he's regretful, don't look, that's gangrenous, don't look at that. That kind of thing. But I think ultimately you're right, like, they just need to have, I mean, even Yrel's a fun example. Because they just didn't do half Yrel's story. You're like, sweet. Yes, we'll bring her back at some point and maybe we'll show you how she became a nutcase. Or maybe we'll not. Because she sort of went from a tourniquet, that's exactly what it is, yeah. Tourniquet. But it is just, yeah, and I'm Yrel, and I'm perfect, and I'm a Mary Sue, and now I'm going to kill you all. You're like, that's a good turn. Can we please have some context for the middle a little bit, please?
Well, Yrel didn't have to feel like a Mary Sue. It was just...
it's just that they didn't put the bit where she went from, I've got my first kill with a pickaxe in a mine, to I'm the leader of the Draenei. They sort of did that in one step.
It's that thing, I mean, you know, where that name comes from. I forget the other one, but, like, you know, Wesley Crusher, say, in some of, like, early TNGs, like another example. The thing with Yrel is, like, where she started, good. Where she ended, could have been good. Yeah. Problem was, there was supposed to be a raid tier in Shattrath, which was probably going to be the bit where Yrel would have... it's the middle of her story. That's probably where there is a dark moment that she overcomes some things. And that would have been where Yrel's sort of, you know, where she ends up, where that, like, actually would have felt earned and really good. Because I think, like, as she was at the start of the expansion, great. It was just...
Oh, I've seen her.
But again, like, Hellfire Citadel was a mess. I still remember the Nixium video at the end. The Nixium, like, spoof video for the Hellfire Citadel thing, where, like, Warlords of Draenor may be the strongest narrative start they've had to a WoW expansion. And they completely fucked it with the final patch. But what I think was a good example of like generating a few new characters.
Yeah,
I mean, hell, Gul'dan, AU Gul'dan, they kind of managed to have him actually be a successful enough villain.
Yeah, I think that actually worked very well, having him as boss in
Yeah.
Nighthold. I think people were really excited to actually get in there and kill him. But then that's just because he was Gul'dan wearing the skin of another Gul'dan. Because Gul'dan is our Gul'dan. We know the name Gul'dan. It's like, how many people, if you pulled them on it randomly, knew it was an AU Gul'dan? Versus, oh, he's back somehow, whatever.
True,
But I think
true.
that's how you actually get... It feels annoying to people who are... Because I'll ultimately take the view far too often of a pretty heavy critic on it. I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Blah, 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 blah. This is like a logical whole, etc., etc., etc. But I think so much of World of Warcraft was good when it just went, what's cool? Make it make sense. I don't give a shit. And I was like, oh, Gul'dan's back. And I was like, Gul'dan's back. It's like, he's been dead. You never really saw him. Like, don't care. He's back. He's cool. Like, fair enough. Ilden's back. Why is he back? Where'd he go? What happened? Did we not kill him? No, it's fine. No, it's fine. Shh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He's back. It's cool. Please clap. It's like they just bring. They could, obviously they've disenchanted Arthas, and they've dusted Garrosh. But at the same time, I think if someone had a perspective at the moment where they came back and went, Garrosh and Arthas are back for some reason, everyone would be like, this doesn't make sense. However,
to a degree.
Good job.
But a good example is like, don't bring characters back like how they bring Thrall back.
oh yeah,
Thrall's been pointless.
yeah.
He's been pointless to the degree where I almost think it would have been better if he was killed off in WoD or something. Or Legion. I don't know. Like, Thrall's just been so pointless. Like, he's not really served much of a purpose. Or like, they've brought him back as a plot device once or twice to be like, this is the old... yep, he threw an axe. Hell yeah. Big move.
Massive. Oh yeah, hell yeah. Remember she was there for a second.
Man, I would kill to know what the plan was. 'Cause I remember when a little birdie told me that the Archon was originally the main villain, and
like every single thing about that. Yeah.
Was Zoval was like being like, I don't literally mean puppeted. But like, yeah, like apparently that was the original plan. And you then kind of think like, all right, what are the Archons like? The true bad guy. The jailer is, something happens there. Helia is relevant. There's a version of that wouldn't have been Zoval.
Yeah, and you say original plan, and that can mean a lot of things to people. That can mean original plan is in, oh yeah, they planned this, and then they went, actually, no, we'll do something else, and then started making the game. But I think if you remember playing through the Kyrian stuff, or basically remember playing half of the Shadowlands story, which I'm sorry if you do, some parts are fine, but the entirety of it was coded to be like that. You could tell they made all that with that in mind, and then changed it at some point. Went back and went, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
this was
it's
about,
like they wouldn't have
that was
wasted
it.
so much screen time on stuff like the Trust if there wasn't originally a purpose for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a crazy time that was. Whereas you look at Dragonflight, and so far that they're setting things up, they're paying those things off. Really right? Like Dragonflight is such a crazy improvement.
Yeah, they're even doing something interesting with, because obviously you look at, we went to Shadowlands. I went to Shadowlands in, I was 9? Yeah, I was 9. And the first hint we saw of death having an important thing going on was at the end of 7. It was the end of Legion. That was Argus stuff. And they're kind of doing sort of similar now, in a way, where I maybe expect to be next expansion in some capacity, like we're talking about. But the Cosmic Void stuff they've been setting up this patch in 10.1 is actually crazy. It's insane to me how much they're actually doing, I think, a proper job. Instead of, well, I don't want to say this because it's a little bit like BFA, where BFA was like, Old God expansion, and I was like, but what? And then you go, did you not do Shrine of the Storms? Did you not do that whole zone? Well, maybe you didn't if you were a Horde player. It's like it.
Oh yeah,
yeah, good time, Blizzard. But like, it was very heavily hinted to be Old Godish. So you're like, yeah, of course. They just went a wee bit too quick with it, which is weird. But then they just split their focus. Where
Oh,
this
BFA
time, I think
is just like, what the hell? Okay,
Yeah.
BFA was a great example of the creatives are doing things for their reason, but they're not telling a story for their players. Because BFA it did not feel like a natural story. It felt like a lot of things that they wanted to set up, and that's what they did. Did they necessarily think about the player experience and the best pace of an expansion-wide story that they could tell? In absolutely no way. Because they wouldn't have made just about any of the decisions that they did if that's how they were thinking. Now, though, it does seem like they are striking a balance between both, though. Especially,
trying, at least.
Yeah, this way we're getting like a prelude patch. Prequel, prelude?
both
Prelude,
work, I guess.
Like, Sarkareth is a villain that's, like, just appeared. I mean, not literally. We know Sarkareth before. But Sarkareth, like, we gotta kill Sarkareth. Sarkareth actually works because they're able to put this patch worth of stuff. So maybe it's that thing where if BFA just had way more narrative, they perhaps would have been able to tell more of those stories and made the pacing work. You know, if they maybe just had more patches or something. Hard to say.
Yeah,
BFA did have a lot of patches, but I mean like connective tissue. So that it's not just do a 2-hour-long intro quest. Okay, kill N'Zoth and I'll give you 70 gold. Done.
Yeah, I feel it was... I'm trying to think of a way to put this. I feel like BFA was, here's a show, here's season 1 and season 3. And you don't have season 3. I feel like there are certain times where you feel like, hey, this is, you've got... Sorry, no, I did that wrong. What was season 1? Whoops, we forgot to give you season 2. Here's season 3. Just a massive chunk missing out of the middle of it. BFA was a little bit more... Hey, you've got all 3 seasons, but you're missing like 2 episodes randomly in the middle of it.
It felt like season 2 of Star Trek Discovery.
Yep.
Where I guess you know about that because you watch the Red Letter Media content. Not okay. It's not like they were all like, "Oh, the Red Lady, or the Red Angel, whatever." But the thing about Disco season 2 is it started off way better than it went, and it went really, really, really bad. But in the sort of way where you felt like they didn't actually know where the plot was going. It was very weird. Yeah, Pike was cool. Apparently Strange New Worlds is good, which is nice. Yeah, that's like what kind of messed up that stuff in BFA. Funny expansion. But I think also probably pretty crazy context going on like in and around that time. So, yeah, kind of tricky. I feel like they're in a better place.
Oh, they certainly are, because my point is that BFA was missing episodes out of the season. Dragonflight is very specifically not. It's still maybe a little bit faster paced for people who aren't super paying attention to details, but largely speaking, they are going, here's episode 1, and here's 2, and here's, oh, sorry, we almost gave you 4, 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and I'll carry on until we're done, and then they'll say, right, on to the next season, and they'll be like, it's a new genre of show. We're like, what the but yeah, no, it'll be fine. It'll be fine.
And I guess that's why I talk about because what originally started this tangent was like the factionalization of Void.
Yeah.
I feel like they are inserting more things that they can play around with within some of these factions, and I think that will help. Now, what I want to see the most is the Alliance to not be boring. Like, personally, I already think the Horde's not boring, but I'm concerned that they will Anduin the Horde. That's why it was nice seeing Bane actually not just be bovine Anduin for a bit.
Yeah.
Recently, I think, you know, it's like you need that level of teeth.
We
need teeth in the factions. They need to not just be, nice, soft, cuddly things. They need to actually feel real.
I really don't see that happening too heavily going forward, just because I'm thinking about the tone of the majority of quests. And if quest designers have freedom, they seem to be, maybe it'll just be, hey, we've done one style, we'll try a different style for this time. But without having done very much on 10.1 PTR, and just looking at 10.07 and 10.0, I think an awful lot of it is just they don't really want to make that, largely speaking.
Well, if that's the case, they're fucked, because that is just going to be a boring world.
Yeah, because that's the case where you think of how I guess things end up being resolved fairly nicely all the time. There's never any like lasting, oh, well, we'll just kill the shit out of these people, or we will continue fighting these. It's always like, we solved the problem now. And I think you look at how the human heritage quest ended, and it's just like, Anduin made most things okay. There's still some bad guys, but the bad guys are away for now, so maybe we'll deal with them later. But it's like, problem solved, wrapped up. And I think that's sort of fair for that one specifically. But then you look at the Orc heritage quest, and it's much the same. Where it's like, hello, all conflict has ceased for now, etc. And we are setting up no further conflict. Mm-hmm. We're all happy, and we're all restoration, we're all etc., etc., etc. There's no there's no point where it was a serious thing that someone from a clan came in and stirred up shit and started kicking the head out of another. They were just like, oh yeah, we're all kind of living together in relative peace for now. And maybe something else can come and disrupt this peace, because it's obviously these two are wrapping up and getting to a different starting point.
Yeah.
But it still feels like I really find it hard to imagine doing a quest and it going, things have gone horribly and they'll stay horribly. There's a little bit of that in the main campaign where things do go wrong and things do like have conflict, but it's very little. It's often interpersonal as opposed to, see Emmons over there, don't like him, kill him. And the other people saying the same thing.
I want the very interpersonal, small stuff to be way toned down. Not way toned down, but decently toned down.
I think it has its place, but...
It does, but the bit that they have leaned away from is that, like, sort of bigger... the scale thing that makes an MMO world actually work. The sword going into Silithus. Like, one good example, I'm not even going to talk about the sword not being used later on in the plot line. Think about all the people that would have been killed by that and the craziness of that. I was like, that wasn't really dealt with. Just like when characters die, I mean, like, regular foot soldiers die, it always feels like so, like, who are they? Like, it just kind of makes it feel smaller, but also like weightless a bit.
Yeah.
I guess that's where I want to see things going. They're doing a better job with their main characters. I liked how they, and I do bring this up because, like, a little bit of hope. Like the very first bit where, like, Sarkareth kills a bunch of the Drakthir after you've already, like, interacted with them all, and then Emberthal gets, like, better characterized as a leader. Because,
that was good,
yeah, like that's a good example of, like, oh, okay, good. You're actually having more consequences be here. Yeah, I suppose it's funny. It's all just seeing where the tone of the world is, where it goes. And I guess that's the thing that, as we started this off talking about, like a big void thing, a big light thing, that's their opportunity to do a big existential threat narrative, but one that is perhaps coming to us, that gets to feel like a world-shaking event in a way that, like, is actually truly meaningful.
Yeah,
instead of just like, oh, woo, fantasy, nothing matters.
Yeah, it needs to be, and this is where I think the light stuff is the most potential for that, because of how it shakes existing foundations and existing beliefs. It's like, okay, well, how do you introduce conflict whenever conflict's been largely wiped out? Well, you change people's perspectives, you change people's priorities.
Yeah.
So you have someone going and go, right, you're either on our side or you're dead. What's the thing? Yes, light is actually very good for, hey, you like the light, and you've been a good religious person all your life. Kill your friends and family. And then that's the case of, I don't want to. But you are God, and, whatever sense. Should I?
Yeah, you are my capital G God. I guess I have to do this.
Yes, like, what's the should I sacrifice my son to God? He asked for it. Or, like, do that. writ large. You're like, hey, look at that.
Yeah.
You've got conflict. You've got people, crying as they murder their families, and people who decide not to. But then Yrel kicks the door down and goes, nope, lightbound.
And that's all stuff that, like, in the way that Culling of Stratholme works.
Yeah.
That can work. So to like even just see how that trickles and cascades through things, like Draenei, obviously, Velen already is like a little bit conflicted. And then you've got Draenei versus Lightforged Draenei. Oh, that'll be interesting. Also, Lightforged. Are we now going to be a bit suspicious about, suspicious about them? And you just cascades on and on. Church of the Holy Light, Knights of the Silver Hand, Argent Crusade, Argent Dawn. They're probably going to have lots of internal conflicts as they work out, how do they feel about all of this stuff. Then you go over to the Horde. You've got Sunwalkers and Bane. Now for Bane, I think it's particularly interesting for the Tauren, given that they are going to have their own mythological, perspective on all of that. Because they worship the light, I suppose, a bit differently. Even night elves. There's like an aspect there with the night elf priests and their Elune stuff. There's just like so many ways that the light like cascades into genuinely great opportunities for not just character drama, but also civilizational drama. And I think, like, in a big MMO world, that is where things, are strongest. Because, like, these are the very foundations of the world. Like, this is, like, big tectonic plates. This is, like, just stuff of that scale. But then the bit that matters is actually how people feel about it and what it means to them. That's how you make it, like, actually have... depth. It's in the same way that, if something is really, really, really big, but it's completely flat with no detail, you can't really tell what scale it is. Whereas if something's really big, but then, there's like lots of tiny little things on it that let you appreciate its scale. Yeah, like the moon. Then it's like, now I feel scale. So what you want is like the big thing being like light invasion, but then all the detail and the textures, like all the different characters, all the different sub-factions, how they all feel, and then that makes it feel like a truly tremendous big event, rather than just like, this character doesn't like that character, and we like this character, so we're going to fight.
Yeah, I think, because I see people there talking about how, like, good equals evil, a single-digit IQ take, subversion of expectations because light is bad. I think that's probably how the most amateur tellings of these stories have usually gone, where it's just, church is evil. Why? Because we said so. Because everyone actually thinks that all the time, of course. But I think because of how the Alliance are set up, especially when it comes to their mythological founding with Tyr and stuff like that, there's clearly a case of light good. Like, that's undeniable.
Yeah.
The story that World of Warcraft told before with light being evil was the Scarlet. And that was the more classical, religious crusading. Okay, well, you have your dogmatic beliefs, but they're too dogmatic, and you've lost sight of some of the tenets of, like, what your religion should realistically say. And I think that's where that would actually come in if they were to do this expansion or to do the storyline. They would probably understand to go, light isn't inherently bad. However, too much adherence to the light is definitely bad. So, can you have people who are, can you have someone who wields light, open bracket, cosmic force, versus light, open bracket, power granted by Zera, or the Light Mother, or Yrel, or whatever, and you see, like, what happens when the Light Forge fights the Lightbound? Can they fight? Would the light, if being one singular god, not go, well, you're wrong, so you're not getting to fight today. You don't have your power. You actually get to see the kind of, maybe the old school version of the light be back into play, where the old school version of the light, as far as it's described, is if you believe in something hard enough, you get power from the light. Why is that? Because it just loves faith. It's like, what's that? You really believe in, whatever's going on? Yeah, you can fire bolts of penance all day long. Work away. As long as you believe in something. As opposed to the version of the Blood Elf light, where canonically they were, just bending the narrow to their will, which is very different than, you're just magic because you're cool, or your magic because you really believe what someone told you. So I think that's how it still works, isn't it? Yes and no. I think it's like definitely, but also there's a little bit of difference around the place, and like I don't think it's been codified hard how it actually works. I think it is like a force, kind of like magic you can bend, whatever. But there's also clearly versions of the Lightbound, but like, right, here you go. Here you go, you're very strong for reasons that are external to you, I think, which is very fun. Very fun. I think that could be cool. I think.
Yeah. Yeah, big potential.